The famous five. Five on Kirrin Island again. Dedicated to Zorah and Jazz. Apologies in advance for misreading, repeating myself, and losing the place. Chapter 14. A shock for George. Dick looked at George. He didn't think it would matter telling Martin where Timmy was, so long as George didn't give the reason why he'd been left on the island. But George was going to hold her tongue now. She looked at Martin and spoke quite airily. "Oh, Timmy, we left him behind today. He's all right." "Gone out shopping with your mother, I suppose. Hoping for a visit to the butcher's," said Martin. This was the first joke he had ever made to the children, and though it was rather a feeble one, they laughed heartily. Martin looked pleased. He began to try and think of another little joke, while his deft hands put reds and blues and greens on the little wooden figures. They all had a huge tea. Then, when the clock said 6:15, the girls carried the painted figures carefully back to the Coast Guard, who was delighted with them. Dick took back the little tins of paint, and the brush stuck in a jar of turpentine. "Well now, he's clever, that boy, isn't he?" said the Coast Guard, eyeing the figures in delight. "Looks sort of miserable and sulky, but he's not a bad sort of boy." "I'll just have one more squint through your telescope," said George, "before it gets too dark." She tilted it towards the island, but once more there was no sign of Timmy, or of her father either. She looked for some time, and then went to join the others. She shook her head as they raised their eyebrows inquiringly. They washed up the tea things and cleared away neatly. Nobody felt as if they wanted to wait and see Mr. Kirrin. They didn't feel as if they liked him very much, now they knew how hard he was on Martin. "Thanks for a lovely afternoon," said Martin, limping to the door with them. "I enjoyed my spot of painting, to say nothing of your company." "You stick out for your painting," said Julian. "If it's the thing you've got to do, and you know it, you must go all out for it, see?" "Yes," said Martin, and his face went sullen again. "But there are things that make it difficult. Things I can't very well tell you. Oh well, never mind. I dare say it will all come right one day, and I'll be a famous artist with pictures in the Academy." "Come on quickly," said Dick in a low voice to Julian. "There's his father coming back." They hurried off down the cliff path, seeing Mr. Kirrin out of the corner of their eyes, coming the other way. "Horrid man," said Anne, "forbidding Martin to do what he really wants to do. And he seemed so nice and jolly all over us, didn't he?" "Very all over us," said Dick, smiling at Anne's new word. "But there are a lot of people like that, one thing at home and another outside." "I hope Mr. Kirrin hasn't been trying to explore the passage in the side of the quarry," said George, looking back and watching the man walk up to his back door. "It would be too bad if he butted in and spoilt our fun. I mean, there may be nothing to discover at all, but it will be fun even finding out if there is nothing." "Very involved," said Dick with a grin, "but I gather what you mean. I say, that was a good tea, wasn't it?" "Yes," said George, looking all around her in an absent-minded manner. "What's up?" said Dick. "What are you looking like that for?" "Oh, how silly of me. I was just looking for Timmy," said George. "You know, I'm so used to him always being at my heels or somewhere near that I just can't get used to him not being here." "Yes, I feel a bit like that too," said Julian, "as if there was something missing all the time. Good old Tim. We shall miss him awfully, all of us. But you most of all, George." "Yes, especially on my bed at night," said George. "I shan't be able to sleep for ages and ages." "I'll wrap a cushion up in a rug and plunk it down on your feet when you're in bed," said Dick. "Then it will feel like Timmy." It won't. Don't be silly, said George, rather crossly. And anyway, it wouldn't smell like him. He's got a lovely smell. Yes, a Timmy smell, agreed Anne. I like it too. The evening went very quickly. Playing the endless game of Monopoly again, Julian lay in bed later, watching for Uncle's signal. Needless to say, George was at the window too. They waited for 10:30. Now, said Julian, and just as he spoke, there came the first flash from the lantern in the tower. 1, counted George, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. She waited anxiously to see if there were any more, but there weren't. Now you can go to bed in peace, said Julian to George. Your father is all right, and that means Timmy is all right too. Probably he has remembered to give Timmy a good supper, and he has had something himself as well. Well, Timmy would soon remind him if he forgot to feed him, that's one thing, said George, slipping out of the room. Good night, Dick. Good night, Ju. See you in the morning. And she went back to her own bed and snuggled down under the sheets. It was strange not to have Timmy on her feet. She tossed about for a while, missing him, and then fell asleep quite suddenly. She dreamt of her island. She was there with Timmy, and they were discovering ingots of gold down in the dungeon. What a lovely dream. Next morning dawned bright and sunny. The April sky was as blue as the forget-me-nots coming out in the garden. George gazed out of the dining room window at breakfast time, wondering if Timmy was running about her island. Dreaming about Tim, said Julian with a laugh. Never mind. You'll soon see him, George. Another hour or so, and you'll feast your eyes on him through the Coast Guard's telescope. Do you really think you'll be able to make out Tim if he's in the tower with your father at 10:30? Asked her mother. I shouldn't have thought you would be able to. Yes, I shall, Mother, said George. It's a very powerful telescope, you know. I'll just go up and make my bed, then I'll go up the cliff path. Anyone else coming? I want Anne to help me with some turning out, said her mother. I'm looking out some old clothes to give to the vicar's wife for her jumble sale. You don't mind helping me, Anne, do you? No, I'd like to, said Anne once again. What are the boys going to do? I think I must do a bit of my holiday work this morning, said Julian with a sigh. I don't want to, but I've kept on putting it off. You'd better do some too, Dick. You know what you are. You'll leave it all to the last day if you're not careful. All right, I'll do some too, said Dick. You won't mind scooting up to the Coast Guard's cottage alone, will you, George? Not a bit, said George. I'll come back just after 10:30, as soon as I've spotted Timmy and Father. She disappeared to make her bed. Julian and Dick went to fetch some books. Anne went to make her bed too, and then came down to help her aunt. In a few minutes George yelled goodbye and rushed out of the house. What a hurricane, said her mother. It seems as if George never walks, if she can possibly run. Now, Anne, put the clothes in 3 piles. Very old, not so old, and the quite nice. Just before 10:30, Julian went up to his window to watch for the signal from his uncle. He waited patiently. A few seconds after the half hour, the flashes came. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good. Now George would settle down for the day. Perhaps they could go to the quarry in the afternoon. Julian went back to his books and was soon buried in them, with Dick grunting by his side. At about 5 minutes to 11, there was the sound of running feet and panting breath. George appeared at the door of the sitting room where the 2 boys were doing their work. They looked up. George was red in the face, and her hair was windblown. She forgot to get her breath back enough to speak. Julian, Dick, something's happened. Timmy wasn't there. What do you mean? Said Julian in surprise. George slumped down onto a chair, still panting. The boys could see she was trembling too. It's serious, Julian. I tell you, Timmy wasn't in the tower when the signals came. Well, it only means that your absent-minded father forgot to take him up with him, said Julian in his most sensible voice. What did you see? I had my eye glued to the telescope, said George, and suddenly I saw someone come into the little glass room at the top. I looked for Timmy, of course, at once. But I tell you, he wasn't there. The 6 flashes came, the man disappeared, and that was all. No Timmy. Oh, I do feel so dreadfully worried, Julian. Well, don't be, said Julian soothingly. Honestly, I'm sure that's what happened. Your father forgot about Timmy. Anyway, if you saw him, obviously things are all right. I'm not thinking about father, cried George. He must be all right if he flashed the signals. I'm thinking about Timmy. Why, even if father forgot to take him, he'd go with him. You know that. Your father might have shut the door at the bottom and prevented Timmy from going up, said Dick. He might, said George, frowning. She hadn't thought of that. Oh dear, now I shall worry all day. Why didn't I stay with Timmy? What shall I do now? Wait till tomorrow morning, said Dick. Then probably you'll see old Tim all right. Tomorrow morning? Why, that's ages away, said poor George. She put her head in her hands and groaned. Oh, nobody understands how much I love Timmy. You would perhaps if you had a dog of your own, Julian. It's an awful feeling, really. Oh, Timmy, are you all right? Of course he's all right, said Julian impatiently. Do pull yourself together, George. I feel as if something's wrong, said George, looking obstinate. Julian, I think I'd better go across to the island. No, said Julian at once. Don't be idiotic, George. Nothing is wrong, except that your father's been forgetful. He sent a signal. Okay, that's enough. You're not to go and create a scene over there with him. That would be disgraceful. Well, I'll try and be patient, said George unexpectedly. She got up, looking worried. Julian spoke in a kinder voice. Cheer up, old thing. You do go off at the deep end sometimes, don't you? End of chapter 14.